Okay, Pamoja, HLs and SLs. I'm looking at sources of finance, which can be a very important topic in exams, and I thought I'll just put together a quick video. I've written down, this is my classroom. I'm sorry that the lights are really flashing quite strongly on the board. Okay, so we've got two broad methods of raising finance for businesses, whether it's uh, short to medium term businesses or even long term businesses. Okay, so in general, there are two very broad categories. One is the internal sources, and then you've got the external sources of finance. Pretty much for internal sources of finance, you would see that it's personal funds that owner or partners usually have. Retained profit is something that businesses would keep aside a part of their profits every year into a fund, so that in the event that in future there's a requirement or a need to dip into those funds, they would use that. So it's simply accumulated profit over several years. And then sale of assets, they might have some unused assets in their business which might be of good use if they need some short finances, which is very internal. So they do not look outside, they don't seek funds from outsiders, they would look at what's there within their reach, and they would look at internal sources of finance. Okay, so we've only got three there. The more difficult aspect here would be understanding correctly what are the different external sources of finance that businesses usually have. So we categorize that into three areas. One based on the short-term requirement, which is about a year, 12 months, which means that such financial requirements are pretty much needed for like a maximum 1 year's time. Okay, medium term is any time that ranges from 1 to 5 years. That's why it's medium term. It's not a long term, because long term we're looking at something beyond 5 years, extending to say 20, 30, 40 years. Okay, that's like our mortgages. Parents have mortgages. Okay, so for our businesses, what are these? Okay, so I'm going to first take the analogy of probably a restaurant. Okay, so for a restaurant, a short-term need for finance would be, they would need to buy tomato sauces, lettuce. This is the example that I use for my students, and they really remember it better through this example. Okay, this topic, although which seems sort of very easy to remember and to learn, can be very, very difficult, and a lot of students lose marks in this topic simply because they don't categorize the finance methods into the correct category, and that's where you lose precious marks. So the example of the restaurant should be at the back of your mind, okay, for this topic. Tomato sauce is short term. You don't need to take a loan to buy tomato sauce. You only need to probably overdraw your account. So a bank overdraft is a short-term source of finance, because you're going to learn later in cash flow forecast. Again, I'm going to explain that in a video, how you're allowed as a current account business person who has a current account with a bank. Business people, not you and me, like ordinary savings accounts that we hold, we are not allowed to overdraw our accounts. We are, but the interest rates are very, very high. So business people have current accounts with their banks, and they are allowed to overdraw their accounts. Okay, so they would resort to a bank overdraft as a short-term source of finance. They also could take a trade credit. What's a trade credit? It's basically credit that you seek from suppliers. You tell them that, hey, look, I'm not going to pay you cash immediately. I'm going to pay after, say, 3 months. So that's trade credit. I also have debt factoring, which means it's like an agency which buys all your debt and gives you immediate cash. So if you have 2 or 3 customers who have not paid you cash immediately for what you've sold to them, but you have, say, 3 pieces of invoices. Okay, you've got say an invoice for $2,000. You've got another customer who's agreed to pay you after 3 months. So this invoice says that that customer is going to pay after 5 months. So you have such invoices. You go to the debt factoring house and you sell these invoices to them. They'll give you immediate cash on those invoices, but they're going to hold back, say, 10% or 15% commission. So if you have to get $10,000 against these invoices, you probably might only receive $9,500, okay? And then after those 3 months, 5 months, it is their responsibility to collect debt from the customers, okay? So these are the 3 types of short-term sources of finance, okay? Now each have drawbacks and benefits. Now when you evaluate, which is the command term, which is very difficult, and that's where a lot of marks gets lost, okay? When you're asked to evaluate, when you're asked to discuss, you have to look at the pros and cons, okay? So I'm going to write pros as probably a tick mark and cons as a cross, so you can see. A bank overdraft, you get immediate cash, right? But a drawback is that you've got to pay interest on it, and it sometimes can be extremely high. Trade credit from suppliers, you do get your supplies, your materials, so you get your let's say materials, yeah. You do get your raw materials. You don't have to like pay cash immediately because you have borrowed materials on credit. But the drawback could be you can't keep doing this to your supplier for a long term because they would simply say, all right, I think we're done with you. We can look at another supplier. Once, twice, yes, but if you often seek trade credit from suppliers, you might actually lose them, okay? Debt factoring, yes, you get immediate cash at your disposal, but the drawback would be you're getting less, and sometimes they might chase, okay, and it's not a nice thing. So you're getting only $9,500 as opposed to $10,000, so you get less. So that's short term. Remember, tomato sauce, lettuce, cabbage, carrots. You only need these. You could buy carrots, like say bulk, from a supplier, and tell them, hey, look, I'm going to pay after a month. That's possible, okay? Short term. That's where you remember. Medium term is 1 to 5 years. Usually this is done for assets, not as in long-term assets, but medium-term assets. So for a restaurant, their assets, medium-term, which is not very, not like a building. A building is different to an oven, okay? So I've got an oven written there. So an oven, to buy an oven, what would you, where would you go? What sort of a finance would you raise? So keeping oven as a background, I'm going to teach you medium-term finance, okay? So you could either lease it. So you can, if you're a restaurant, you probably could lease maybe a dozen ovens, okay? You don't have to outrightly own them. So that's the advantage of leasing. You don't have to own them by paying hefty cash. You can hold on to your cash for other good uses. But a drawback would be you never get to own them. You're never the owner. So here, you get to put your cash to other good use and you get the asset, but you never tend to be the owner. A lot of costs. It's like, in Australia, a lot of people buy cars, but a lot of people do lease cars, okay? So they don't have to pay that upfront huge amount, yet they have to incur costs, and they never get to own it because after 5 years you have to give back that car back to the lessor. So leasing is one option for medium-term finance. You don't have to buy all, like even, I'm going to write here, say vehicles. So if the restaurant has its own delivery vehicles, delivery vans, you don't have to outrightly own them. You can just lease it and use your cash for other constructive uses, okay? You could also look at a medium-term bank loan. See, it's medium-term, it's not long-term, so it's good to look at medium-term. There's no short-term bank loan, that's called bank overdraft. So medium-term bank loan is anything that's given from 1 to 5 years, okay? I'll talk about loans later. Grants and subsidies are something that governments usually give. It's great, a lot of benefits to it, but a drawback could be A lot of bureaucracy, political interference, first come first. They look at how socially responsible you are, and a lot of twists attached to it. Okay, so grants and subsidies are also medium-term finance. So to buy an oven, to buy delivery vans, you got to look at leasing, okay, or medium-term bank loan. And you got long-term, anything that's from 5 to 30 years or more than that. The best way to raise long-term finance would be share capital. Obviously, you have abundant amounts of capital in your business through this because the public can invest in your company. So a lot of capital is at your disposal. A drawback would be, often students forget to write the drawback. Well, the minute you sell your shares to the public, you lose your ownership and control. And that's a very big drawback. Hence, Lego is still a private limited company because they don't want the public to own it and the family's stake would be diluted. So they want to hold on and cling to their ownership and control. Okay, so that's one drawback. But then share capital is a very interesting long-term finance because you can just grow big. Look at all the companies, Facebook, how big have they grown thanks to them going public. Long-term bank loan is something that you could ask your bank to lend it to you. Now, the example in our restaurant case would be a restaurant might decide that, hey, you know what, we've done very well in this location, let's add 2 more branches in other locations. So that's something very long-term. You need a lot of investment to build another restaurant or to put up another restaurant. So you would need huge amounts of capital. So that's how you decipher what classifies as short-term, medium-term, long-term. So remember, tomato sauce, carrots, oven, delivery vans, and now you want to set up another branch, open up another new restaurant, which calls for a lot of investment. So a long-term bank loan, the advantage is that yes, you do get instantaneous cash from the bank, but there's a twist to it. You got to offer a security to the bank, collateral. You need to keep something as a security, usually for mortgages. In your new syllabus, there's no mortgage, so I can't really talk about that. But this is nothing but a mortgage. You pledge your house against which money is lent for you to buy the property. So it's just like that. And you want to pay interest. That's another drawback. Last but not the least, you can also look out for venture capitalists or business angels. They can provide cash as well to you. I think you're going to be looking at Dragon's Den. There's a couple of shows. Dragon's Den, you've got The Apprentice, and you've got so many such programs. Shark Tank. So if you watch that, it's good. You know what this is. So angels and venture capitalists, they just love fantastic ideas in which they can invest. So yeah, you get support from them. A drawback would be they want to have a stake in your business. Okay, they want, what is it in them in investing in your business? So they want something back. So this is it. Yeah. So you've got 3 broad sources of categories within external sources: short, medium, long term. Every time you answer a question on sources of finance, just remember what I said. Carrots, vans, opening a new restaurant. To buy vans, you can't just go with a bank overdraft. You need something that's medium term. So leasing is a good option. To buy carrots, you don't need to issue shares. You see, it's funny, but students do make this mistake, okay? And I'm saying this on experience. You got to ask a question. Wait a minute. This is like a carrot, raw materials, right? This company wants to buy raw materials. So for carrots, it's short term. It cannot be issuing shares. So you got to remember these 3 examples that I've given as a background whenever you look at a question in this topic, okay? So I hope that this video has helped you. You can always ask me questions on Skype, okay, or email. Thanks. Goodbye.